Hey, how's it going, everybody? Lieutenant Atterbury here with the Lobo Pack podcast. Today, we have Commander Powell, the executive officer at NROTC at UNM. Sir, it's an honor to have you on the podcast. Super awesome just to talk more about the Navy, get to know a little bit more about what you guys do. You guys are on the third floor of our building, so it's really cool to get more people to talk about their time working here in ROTC, not only because I don't know, but it'll help you guys know if you're ever interested in coming out to UNM to either go NROTC or something like that. But, sir, if you don't mind, just start off. We always want to know, what is the origin story? You know, where did you come from, sir?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's good to be on here. Origin story is I was born and raised in Indiana, which is not close to the water really whatsoever. And that was a little bit of what drew me to the Navy, just something different and something to go see the world and get out of Indiana and see something new. So growing up, I did Boy Scouts, and I really enjoyed the leadership aspect of Boy Scouts and the service aspect, and really both of those are big parts of the organization. And so as I was looking around for what I wanted to do, you know, in high school, trying to figure out, well, where do I go to college? What do I want to do with my life? I wanted to try and find something that matched up well with both of those, and the military seemed like a good fit. And we don't have it. I didn't have anybody in my immediate family that was also in the service, so I didn't have any ties to anything specific, and really enjoyed the idea of joining the Navy, being on a ship, going around, being able to meet the leadership side of things, the service side, and then just experience all sorts of different cultures and try something new. So that's what drew me to the Navy in the first place. I applied to a few different colleges. I got into the Naval Academy, went there, and then after 4 years, graduated, and I was lucky enough to get my first service assignment, which was surface warfare, which is what I wanted to do. And then at that time, there was not a whole lot of training for surface warfare officers. So they were experimenting with computer-based training. So they gave us a set of 5 CDs with all the different things they said we would need to know to be a surface warfare officer, and 30 days of basket leave. And so I graduated on May 27th, and then took my 30 days of basket leave, and then July 5th, right after the 4th of July, I checked into my first ship. I drove cross country, checked into my first ship with my CDs, and figured it out from there.
Okay, so you graduated. What sort of opportunities did you get in the Naval Academy, and why choose the Naval Academy versus like going to a traditional college? Is it the opportunities you got, or what was so interesting about that?
Well, so one of the things I really liked was the Naval Academy is free, which really drew me to it. And also experiencing something different than going to, for instance, I grew up in Muncie. Ball State is right there. And I had a ton of classmates who graduated and then just stayed in Muncie and went to Ball State. And I wanted to get away from Indiana, just experience something different. So the Naval Academy seemed good. The free part was also really nice. And then while I was there, they have, just like I'm sure you do on the Army side, different summer options to go out and just experience the fleet and different parts of the fleet. Right after your freshman year, NROTC midshipmen get the exact same thing. Right after your freshman year, you go out and do a program. We called it Protramid. They call it Quartermid. It's the same thing. You spend a week with each major community, surface warfare, aviation, the Marine Corps. You go around and they try and sell you on, look how cool our community is. So submarines, put us all on a submarine overnight. So we got to spend about 24 hours on a submarine, and, you know, they do the ankles and the dangles, and they go around and you get to see the whole submarine, and they try and convince you, you know, look how cool submarines are. You should go submarines. The Marines had us go, gave us all the kit and all the equipment and the fake rifles, and then they loaded us all into CH-46s at the time and flew us out to an LZ, and then had us go do like platoon on platoon, small unit tactics, and then we all slept outside in the little bivvy sacks they had given us, and then we marched back the next morning. So they were trying to show us, how cool the Marines are. Same for everything else. Aviators put us up in, different aircraft and let us fly around. said, hey, look, you should come be an aviator. So everybody gets that, basically like a leveling experience. So you get to see all the different communities. And I just really liked the ships and the idea of being on the ship. So then, the next few summers they call them different cruises. One summer I went and shadowed mid-grade enlisted and E5 second class petty officer on a ship, and just got to see what's life like for him as he's roaming around the ship doing his job. The next summer I got to follow around a junior officer and see what is life like for him on the ship for a few weeks, and enjoyed both of those as well. And so ended up asking to go surface warfare. We call it service assignment, not service selection, but they do take your preferences into account as much as possible. And that's similar on the Naval Academy and the NROTC side, where going into your senior year, you say, here's what I'd like to do. The Navy looks just like, I'm sure the Army does the same thing. Each community has certain openings, a certain number of openings available. And so try and fill those as they can. Then try and give people the preferences that they want as much as possible, marry up the two of those. Just like detailing, once you're an officer, same thing. You're up for new orders. You say, here's the places I want to go. The Navy, just like the Army, I'm sure, says, well, here's the places we need you to go. Let's see how we can get you someplace we need you that's hopefully high on the list of places you want to go.
Yeah, totally. That we have the sort of same, I would say, job selection type of deal. But for you and then NROTC cadets, when do you have to make that decision? Is it your junior year into your senior year you put up your decision list, or does everything, because I'm trying to understand, because you guys also pick the type of boat you're going to go on, correct? Or is
Yes.
that late? Okay.
Which is only for surface warfare.
Okay.
And really because our training is so short. So leaving your junior year into your senior year, so then fall of your senior year is when you find out what community you're in. And for NROTC, we're commissioning people into what we consider the major unrestricted line, so where you can have command of the unit. So surface warfare, you can command a ship. Submarine warfare, you can have command of a sub. Aviation, you can have command of a squadron. Or then the Marine Corps, where you can have command of platoon, company, moving on up. Not necessarily what we consider restricted line or staff corps, supply, some of the different communities we have. So, on the NROTC side, and similar at the academy, you're going into one of those major communities, and that coming in. And so then going into your senior year, you get to put in your preferences and say, well, here's what I would like. And then fall of your senior year is when you find out what you got into. Then if you're a surface warfare, then spring of your senior year, so just right before you're graduating, is when you can select your ship. And really every other detailing experience you have that we call working with your, I don't know what you call them in the Army, the Marines, I think call them monitors, working with the person who's helping you with your career choices, where you're going to go next, all the detailing for you. We call them detailers. But normally that is similar to what we talked about. You put in your preferences, your detailer has a list of places that they need you to go. And so it becomes a little bit of a back and forth. You'll fill one of the billets they need. Hopefully it's in a place you want to go or a job you want. But the first one is all by order of merit. So all the ships that are available. And the Naval Academy actually does, they do one, and then the NROTC does a separate one. Naval Academy, since they're all right there, it's all in one spot. So they have a giant board with little placards, magnetic placards with the name of every ship. And so every home port, so you've got, Sasebo, you've got Yokosuka, you've got Norfolk, and all the ships that are there. And if there's 3 spots on the ship, then there's 3 little placards for that ship, and that'll have the ship name. The surface warfare officer with the highest order of merit goes first. And so they get to go up and they can pick anything up on the board. And then the one with the second highest order of merit goes next, and then it just works down until you get to the surface warfare officer with the lowest order of merit. Picks what's left and what's available. And then NROTC does the same thing, although since we're so spread out, we do ours virtually same thing. There's a list of all the ships that are available. All the NROTC midshipmen get mixed together, and you get one giant list by order of merit for all the surface warfare officers in ROTC. the person that's number one gets to choose first of all the ships that are there and available, and it just works its way on down, and it bounces around from first person will be from one unit to the next unit that has number two to the unit that has number three, and it just goes through. It takes a couple days to get through everybody as they just go through, and everybody gets to choose what ship they want to go to.
Which ship did you initially choose?
I was certainly not number one, so I wasn't sure what exactly would be left on the board. I wanted to go to Washington State, which there aren't a lot of ships stationed up there, and it's a fairly small Navy base, at least on the ship side that's there, just because I'd love to do a bunch of outdoor stuff, and it seemed like a great place to go do outdoor things. And if you're on the West Coast, then generally your deployments are you get to go through, you're going to stop in Hawaii, you're probably going to stop in Singapore, Hong Kong, maybe hit Australia on the way there or on the way back, because you have to stop and get fuel and parts and stores and whatnot on your way there and on your way back. So you end up getting, I think, some pretty cool port visits. If you're on the East Coast, you're basically going, also pretty cool port visits. You're probably going into the Mediterranean through the Suez. So you get all the Mediterranean ports. Maybe you go up into like the Baltic, so probably still get some cool ports. But so I wanted to be West Coast. I was hoping for Everett. There were a couple destroyers and some frigates that were stationed up there. And so really I was just hoping that would be left, and then kind of had here's my list of, I'd like the new destroyer. If I don't get that, I'd like the old destroyer. If I don't get that, I'd like the much older frigates, which worked out. And I ended up getting the Momsen, which was one of the destroyers that was up there. Later on, I ended up getting stationed on a frigate that was up there and enjoyed that as well. So looking back on it, I was worried about what ship and what ship class I would get. And looking back on it, I don't think it would have mattered. If I had gotten one of the frigates, I think I still would have really enjoyed the tour, and I would have learned just as much there as I did on the destroyer.
What's the difference between the destroyer and the frigate? Is the destroyer bigger than the frigate?
It is a little bit bigger, and we don't have any more frigates. We decommissioned all of them, so they were all really old.
They're old? Okay.
So older ships, which then just means more maintenance issues. I'm sure it's the same on the Army side, where, equipment gets old, breaks more frequently, just a lot harder to take care of than if it's brand new. Also, the destroyers had Aegis, the Aegis weapon system, and the spy radar, which the frigates did not. And so the destroyers had missiles, which the frigates did not. And so just a larger, more capable platform. Later on, being stationed on the frigate, though, we still were very capable, still had plenty of missions that we could go do. And in some ways, the ship handling side was more fun on the frigate, just because we had bow thrusters. So then we had the ability to control the bow and the stern. And so we could, also being smaller, we were a little bit more maneuverable. So it was, in some ways, it was actually more fun to drive the frigate than it was to drive the destroyer. But I was lucky, is probably the right word, lucky enough to get the Momsen, which was a new destroyer that was up in Everett, Washington. So I got to go to the home port I wanted. I got to go to the ship I wanted. And so I was on it's DDG 92. I was on the Momsen for my first tour, which then was driving cross country, because graduated on the East Coast, got to drive all the way across country to get out to the West Coast. And then I enjoyed being on the ship so much that I asked if I could stay on the same ship for my second division officer tour. Normally, you have 2 different division officer tours, and usually you go and do 2 different ships. So you can experience, 2 different ship classes, or 2 different home ports, or, 2 different jobs, and just get a little bit more experience that way. I asked to stay on the same ship, so I ended up doing just a little bit more than 4 years on board the ship by the time it was all said and done, and had a few different jobs while I was on there, which was enough time that I got to be on 2 deployments. I got to do 3 different workup cycles. So standard ship life is set up on a 3-year cycle, where you do a bunch of maintenance on the ship, because there's a lot of stuff on the ship, so a lot of stuff to break, so a lot of maintenance to do. So you do a bunch of maintenance, you come out of maintenance period, you do a bunch of training. Starts out with small training on the ship for every single warfare area. So damage control, air warfare, strike warfare for cruise missiles, all the different warfare areas that you can do. And every group is training up on their own. Then you start to put that together. So the whole ship is working together on multiple warfare areas at the same time. Then you start to put multiple ships together to get the whole strike group. And so by the time you've done all that training, I mean, that's months worth by the time you get through all of that training. And then you go on deployment. And once you're back from deployment, then you're still, ready and available if anything comes up, if you're needed. And then eventually you go back into maintenance, and you've spent all of this time really building that maintenance package. So as things break, do your best to fix them up. But depending on what it is, you might push that to the next maintenance period. That's also when you can get the ship out of the water, and you can empty out tanks and do just major work that you need to do. And so you build that whole package. And so that's generally a 3-year cycle. I was on board for 4 years and ended up catching, like I said, a couple different deployments and 3 workup cycles by the time it was all done.
Was it just the personnel? Like everybody worked together, and that's why you stayed with it?
I was in engineering, and I was loving my job. I was really enjoying my job. I really enjoyed being in engineering, and it was a good wardroom. I enjoyed all the people I was working with. So I said I wanted to fleet up. What did they do? Well, they gave me a job outside of engineering, and then I was there long enough that all those people left and new people came in. Still a good wardroom. Could have easily gone to another ship and had the same experience, just because all the people, even a lot of the enlisted who generally are in the same ship a little bit longer than officers, a lot of them had already transferred out and new people had come in. But yes, a mix of, it was a job that I liked. I really did enjoy being up in Washington State and being in Everett, stationed up there. So I enjoyed the location and enjoyed the people that I was working with. I was actually a bit of an anomaly. So aviation sends their new graduates, their new commissionees to flight school, which is usually like a 2-year process before you get your wings and you're through flight school and you go to your first squadron. Subs, I know you talked to Lieutenant Coleman, one of our submarine officers. It's about a year-ish school. And so both of those are PCS moves for you. So you graduate, you don't necessarily know what squadron you're going to or what submarine you're going to, because you're PCSing to the school. You're there for a long time, and then you go from there to you figure out where you're going next. Surface warfare had been similar to that, where they had a 6-month school in Newport. And so all the officers went to the 6-month, you graduated, you went to the 6-month school, and then you went on to your ship. And I fell into, in the early 2000s, there was the question of, well, why are we doing all these in-person schools? Wouldn't it be cheaper, more efficient, easier, better? We have these newfangled computers, and we can do all of this computer-based training, and it's exactly the same as in-person training. So you'll get just as good of training, and then, also look at all these cost savings if we don't have to send people to the school. We have since decided that there probably is some in-person training that's necessary. So now we've started what we call BDOC, the Basic Division Officer course, very similar to, I think, what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so you do that, and then we have a course specifically for the Watch You'll Stand, Officer of the Deck, so OOD. So you go to those 2 courses, and then you go from there out to your first ship. And that's still something of an iterative process where we have the school curriculum set, but as ensigns are going out to their ship, and then the ship leadership is providing feedback back to the schoolhouse saying, hey, they know a lot about this, but maybe need to know more about this, or back and forth, then they adjust the curriculum as needed. Yeah, so I fell into a somewhat brief window, which is certainly not the norm now. Now they're getting much more training before the show.
Moving on from that, went to your first ship. What was it like coming to your first unit, and what was it like working with the NCOs that you've had under you?
Got really lucky with my very first ship, and it really, I think somewhat just ended up being luck. So I showed up to the ship, and they were just finishing up the maintenance period and getting ready to start the training phase. And so I got to see a little bit of the maintenance side and the ship just torn apart, and get to crawl through and see everything that you don't necessarily get to see when it's all buttoned up or ready to go be operational. And then I got to see the entire training cycle. So I got to jump in and get trained up through that whole training cycle, and then go see deployment, which that that was just luck. I had no idea what the ship schedule was like. I didn't know how that was going to work. So I just got lucky on that. And then I was put into a division. So your very first job is as a division officer, where you have the ship is split up functionally, like engineering as a department, combat systems as a department, operations as a department, and each of those have a department head over them. And then inside that department, it's split up into divisions. So I got put in engineering. Well, engineering has main propulsion as a division. Electricians are their own division. The auxiliaries are basically like everything else that doesn't fall into main propulsion, or electrical is its own division, and then damage control is a division. So those are generally the 4 divisions that are in engineering. So I was working in main propulsion. They started out just having me have the oil lab, which handles all the fuel and all the oils on the ship. And then from there, I took over all of main propulsion division. And so you have all the enlisted that are in that division under you. There's usually a chief who is really the subject matter expert on that, because as a brand new ensign, you don't know anything. I was a history major. And so
Okay.
It doesn't really matter what your major is. We'll take you and put you in and train you up. And then you have all the enlisted that you need with all the different skills and NECs and naval enlisted classification codes, all the different training that they need on whatever it is. Like main propulsion, the destroyer is a gas turbine ship. So we had 4 gas turbine engines. And so all of the enlisted in main propulsion division were all experts on gas turbine engines, which is an interesting thing to think about on a ship, basically putting a jet engine inside the ship around the ship. But they work out really well. So we just had all the experts that we needed to work on the main engines. I did that most of my time. I did a little bit of time as the auxiliaries division officer. They were gapped with other in between division officers, so I stepped in for a few months. And they have all the different subject matter experts they need for. They have all the refrigerators and the freezers that are on the ship, because if you're underway for weeks at a time, you've got to have all your own freezers and refrigerator. Walk in just giant freezers and refrigerators. So those, the small boats, any of the hydraulic systems on the ship, all the really just anything else fall under auxiliaries division. And that was the same thing. I had a chief, and then the couple I think in that division I had 2 first classes, and then some second classes and third classes who did all the maintenance and all the work and all the preservation and whatnot.
One of the things I talked with Lieutenant Coleman was that when you are in or an officer in that organization, that you're also trying to get more proficient or to get certified for either your job or that next job you're trying to get into. What's the dynamic like for surface warfare officers?
Yes. And so as a division officer, you have your division. And so you're in charge of all those people, everything that comes along with personnel, which I'm sure it's the exact same in the Army. Like once you've got people under you like that, that creates quite a bit of work to take care of them. So you've got all the people, you've got all the equipment that falls under that. So as it breaks, you're responsible for fixing it. Also just the preventative maintenance to make sure it doesn't break. And then usually there's some programs that come along with it. So like for main propulsion, fuel and lube oil quality management are a couple of programs that usually fall under that. So then you're responsible for making sure that, all the fuel meets all the specifications. You're bringing it on properly. You're not spilling any, and that's just one program. Like if you're the electrical officer, then you get the electrical safety program, because we take a giant chunk of steel, we put it in salt water, and then we run electricity through it. Not the safest thing to do. And so the electrical safety program is a big deal. And so if you're an electrical officer, first tour division officer, then you're in charge of the electrical safety program and making sure everybody's doing what they need to for the electrical safety program. So that's your job. At the same time, you also have to stand watch, and because the ship doesn't just move itself. And so as a division officer, you're standing watch. Usually you start out on the bridge, and the bridge is where you actually drive the ship, the plan of the day, and you're actually moving the ship around. So you have to know rules of the road. Don't hit anybody. You have to know ship handling. Don't run aground or hit the pier. You have to know basic tactics of how you're going to drive the ship in wartime. And so you have to learn all that because growing up in Indiana, I didn't drive any boats around. I didn't know the rules of the road. So you have to learn all of that and get proficient on it as a watchstander as well and get qualified. Once you get qualified on the bridge, usually as officer of the deck, where you're in charge of driving the ship and in charge of the bridge team, then you can also get qualified in the Combat Information Center. So for me as a division officer, my first tour, I got qualified officer of the deck up on the bridge. My second tour, I moved to be the training officer in charge of all the training ship-wide. So there I actually had way fewer people, a larger program to be responsible for. And then my watch standing, I was the air warfare coordinator down in combat. So I was in charge of the watch standers that were overseeing just maintaining the air picture, who's around, who's up in the air, and then any air defense if anybody were to have attacked us through the air as well. And so that was another watch station then to have to learn and master because I didn't know, anything about the combat system when I first checked on board. So I had to learn all of that. At the same time, you're also just learning the larger craft of being a surface warfare officer. So even on the destroyer, I had to learn, well, what do amphibious ships do? What do some of the other surface ships, what do the cruisers and the frigates and some of the other surface ship classes do? What are they like? How do we come together? How does the strike group operate? How do naval aviators operate? What are the capabilities and limitations of all the different aircraft that we have? What about the submarines? How do we integrate together? And so you're learning all of that going back to your first tour. So you're standing watch on the bridge. You have your day job as a division officer. You're also trying to learn all of this. The general progression is once you qualify as officer of the deck, then you qualify as a surface warfare officer. And we do that through a board process. Both of those are through a board process. You have a personal qualification standard, a PQS, that you go through and it has line items for observe this, do this, know this, scribe this, for all the different things that might come up. What about this emergency? What about that emergency? And then, so you do your PQS. Once you do your PQS, then you go aboard, and officer of the deck and surface warfare are both with the captain and the department heads. And so you sit down and demonstrate your knowledge. And so once you get off to the deck, then next step is usually surface warfare officer. You get qualified as a surface warfare officer. That's when you get to wear the surface warfare insignia. And then that just shows everybody you know about surface warfare and some general Navy stuff. The aviators have their wings, the submariners have their dolphins, same kind of thing. And that's usually, that process takes a year if you're really, really fast, up to maybe a couple of years if you're not very fast. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really think about it at the time, but looking back on it, I would equate it to getting a master's degree. I mean, you're putting in that level of time and work to really master something. And then you finish up with a board with the captain and the department heads, demonstrate your knowledge, pass that. And then, so for me, I did that and then went down to the Combat Information Center for my next tour, got qualified in the air warfare as an air warfare coordinator. That's what I did as division officer. Then you go away, do what we call shore duty. You probably think of it as staff jobs, but anything not on a ship that we consider shore, do shore duty. Then when you go back to a ship, you go back as a department head. So you were a division officer, you had the division under you, now you're a department head. So you have multiple divisions and divisional officers under you, and then all the enlisted and programs and equipment and everything that comes along with that.
What was your first deployment like?
So our very first deployment was over to just the Western Pacific and around the Philippines. So we were mostly around the Philippines. Then port visits were mostly Guam. We pulled into Malaysia once. We got to go, I don't remember if it was Hong Kong or Singapore for that deployment. But after doing workups, for better or worse, it was something of a letdown because we went out and then, we weren't at war. So, well, I guess technically we were global war on terror at that point. Being on the ship, it's not quite the same as if I was, had been a second lieutenant in the Marines getting deployed to Fallujah or something. And so we did all of our training and then didn't really do a whole lot, which is a good thing because that means we weren't in combat.
One question I did have was, I forget if it was in the 90s, but there was the bombing of, was it the USS Cole or something like that?
Yes, early 2000s.
With stuff like that, was that ever something talked about during your career? Like, hey, like you obviously can't go and, you know, start lobbing missiles and stuff like that, but there's other threats out there like that.
Certainly. And yes, I was actually lucky enough when I was at the academy, when I was a midshipman, I got to listen to the person who was the CEO of the Cole at the time came and gave a talk about it. So yes, it's definitely something we talked about. And every time we'd pull into port, you know, part of pulling to port wouldn't be just shutting everything down and going ashore. We'd be manning a bunch of watches, making sure that we were prepared if anything like that were to happen, that we were ready to go. And so, you know, even on deployment, fortunately, nothing like that happened to the ship while I was there, probably partially because of the, you know, all the different preparation that we went through and all the watches that we were staying in and the fact that we were ready, just like every other warship that was out there at the time. So first deployment was to the Philippines. And I also, for me, I was working on getting qualified, working on officer of the deck, working on surface warfare officer, working on learning my job as a division officer. And so I would say I was so head down in all of that. I wasn't really paying much attention to, well, what is the ship doing? Like, what's our purpose here?
Oh, really? Okay.
Which is an interesting way to think about it. Our second deployment, we were off the Horn of Africa, so we made it a little bit farther into Central Command at the time, still, I think. And so we were part of the counter-piracy operations that were going on out there. Didn't capture any pirates, which again, good and bad, right? You know, we did all of the workups and all the preparation. Nice that there weren't any pirate attacks that we were, you know, around the area where we were while we were there. Also a little disappointing that we did all of that preparation and then didn't necessarily see anything. But that was a fun deployment. Got to pull into the Seychelles. I didn't even know that the Seychelles existed until
And what's that, sir?
It's a small island chain out in the Indian Ocean.
Okay.
There. We pulled into Kenya, which was amazing. Got to go on a safari while I was out in
Oh, really?
So definitely got to do see the world part of things. Pulled into Australia on the way back from that deployment. So that was another fun one. Paying a little bit more attention. I was standing watch in combat though. That's when I was standing watch as an air watch stander. And for better or worse, pirates weren't attacking us from the air. So for me personally, not a whole lot happening on the air side. Again, good and bad. But that was my second deployment. And then I was fortunate enough to go over to Italy for my shore tour. So I was stationed at 6th Fleet there in Naples, Italy. And I was an exercise planner. So I planned multinational exercises. 6th Fleet is an interesting one because we don't really station a lot of ships there in EUCOM or AFRICOM. Mostly we'd get ships on their way from the East Coast as they were going to CENTCOM to go on deployment in Central Command, and then on their way back. So we'd have them for a little bit of time. We'd do different exercises with different countries. We'd put together, okay, well, we've got a ship coming through. We've got some time. What country do we want to go engage with? Okay, well, if it's this country, what are the objectives? What do we want to do as an exercise? So it was interesting to get to put all that together, and certainly a way bigger scope and picture than what I had when I was on the ship, just thinking about, okay, well, what's happening in engineering department on this day? What's going on with main engine 2 Bravo? Why is this happening? Let's get that fixed. To all of a sudden, okay, well, what are our objectives in Europe and specifically like this country? Okay, well, how do we design an exercise that furthers our objectives with this country? What can we share with them? What can't we share with them as we come through? What assets do we have available? How do we put together a useful exercise where we get trained up, they get trained up, and ideally we've moved our engagement forward with that country or however many countries we pull into.
And is it just EUCOM EVs that you're, talking with, or is it? Yeah, and I mean, what sort of the sizes are these exercises you're doing?
Mostly with the navies. Sometimes EUCOM would pull us into like a joint exercise potentially, and so we'd help feed into the joint exercise. 6th Fleet also has 2 COCOMs that they have to answer to because they're the fleet for EUCOM and AFRICOM. I was on the EUCOM side, but I had fellow lieutenants who were there as AFRICOM planners who were doing exercises with ships and the navies in Africa doing the exact same.
It's a prominent navy in like Africa.
Most of every country except probably Somalia had some sort of navy.
Okay. Are they just small littoral ships basically? And that's
yes,
all I can
not
because they don't have capabilities, I was
Yeah,
imagining.
certainly not. They're not deploying out to like the Pacific Ocean or anything from where they are. So they're mostly concerned with coastal defense, usually also helping out with fishery or offshore oil regulation. So fishing around just Africa in general is a huge business. And so trying to manage that. Anybody that was over near the Horn of Africa was also then interested and worried about piracy. And so counter piracy is not quite the same mission sets as maybe like the fun, cool mission sets we think about, like big Mahanian style, like Battle of Midway, for instance, but certainly very important and also important for us too, because if they're worried about illegal or unregulated fishing and then we come in and then we don't do anything to help them, then how's that necessarily supporting international order or the international rules? So it's still important and still something that we can work with them on. So on the European side, do a similar thing of doing exercises with different countries that were around and available. Everything from major multinational exercise where we'd just be feeding in, or maybe a NATO exercise where we're just feeding into a larger exercise, especially something like NATO, where they've got their own military planners as well. And so they might plan a NATO exercise. So now we're just going not necessarily to design and create the exercise, but here now as a member of NATO, offering some forces up to this exercise. Now, how do we scope it so that we get as much as we can out of it while still moving forward, NATO's exercise objectives?
Is there a lot done in the Baltic, sort of up north where there's, I guess, ice and stuff like that?
Yes. I forget which year it was. Recently, we sent a strike group up to do basically just to go as far north as they could for as long as they could, because it had been a long time since we'd been up there, just to make sure that we could still do it. Yes, Baltic, there was plenty in the Baltic. The Black Sea, I was over there well before 2014 and well before Russia started. I say well before. I was there from 2009 to 2012. And so we were still sending ships in the Black Sea. We were doing exercises with Ukraine. We were doing exercises with Turkey, all the different countries around there. So Mediterranean, definitely the Atlantic. Obviously, UK still is a huge partner, so we do plenty of exercises with them, really just all the countries.
Awesome. Moving on from there, when you're a planner on shore duty, you're not really connected to being on a ship, right?
No, most of the exercises I did had ship involvement. So for some of them, like I would go in and arc the ship. So I still had a little bit of a tie to the surface Navy. But that's also your chance to go do a ton of different things. So I went to 6th Fleet and I was on a fleet staff. You could also go to the Naval Postgraduate School and spend 2 or 3 years getting your master's degree. And like that is your day job, is getting your master's degree. You could do ROTC unit. So like Lieutenant Coleman, he's on that point. He did his division officer time. Now a little bit different because he's submarine, not surface warfare, but same thing. We've got a surface warfare officer upstairs as well. He did his division officer time. Now this is his short duty. He came to Albuquerque, New Mexico to teach midshipmen for 3 years. And that's what he's doing for short duty. You can go be a detailer. Somebody's got to do the detailing job. You can go and do some staff work in the Pentagon. I mean, all sorts of different areas. Really all those different, anything that's not a ship, they need staff as well. And so that's your chance to go do something like that.
Being in 6th Fleet sounds like an amazing opportunity. Like, was it super competitive to get there?
It wasn't nearly as competitive as I expected it to be. Partially because at the time, 6th Fleet certainly wasn't what it is today. Russia and Ukraine weren't at war. Israel-Gaza wasn't happening. This was before the Arab Spring. Like Arab Spring hadn't even happened. So it was seen as more of, okay, well, you're just going to go over and get a chance to be in Europe for 3 years. Now, while I was there, Arab Spring happened. It has since turned into there's a lot more going on operationally now than when I was there. So I really enjoyed it. It wasn't nearly as hard to get as I thought it would be. But anyway, so I did that. Then I went back as a department head. I was a chief engineer for my department head tours. We do 2 department head tours. You get a chance to go to different ships. Again, just experience more. You can also, now we've started doing single owner tour department head. So you can use 3 years on one ship. I was on a frigate for 1.5 years, and then I was on a cruiser for 1.5 years, chief engineer both times. I was as a department head Then I went back to shore duty, had more shore duty, and then from there, you're waiting to see if you screen for command or not, because the next step then would be executive officer or commanding officer of a ship, because you've got the divisions, then you've got the departments, and then the next level up is the ship itself. So I didn't screen for command of a ship. I screened for what's called EXO Special Mission. So then I went to Tripoli, which still is a large deck amphib. She was just finishing up the pre-commissioning process, just getting built. So brand new ship. I actually went out to Pascagoula and joined the ship while they were still in the shipyard there at Pascagoula.
And where's Pascagoula?
Mississippi.
Mississippi. Okay.
Yes. So on the Gulf Coast, first time in Mississippi. While I was there, just as the ship was finishing up, then COVID happened. So then we had to deal with, okay, well, what sailors that are coming to man the ship? And now, because ships, you're very close together. And there's just no way to get around it. So trying to figure out COVID on ships was its own thing. Then we commissioned, we sailed around. Tripoli was big enough. We didn't want to go through the Panama Canal. So I got to sail all the way around to San Diego, all, down the coast of South America, all the way back up. But COVID was still in full swing. So it was not nearly as exciting of a deployment as we were hoping, or as we were hoping it was going to be. We didn't get nearly the port visits. I mean, we didn't get any port visits. We did have to pull in to refuel, but nobody was allowed off the ship. Nobody was allowed on the ship. No contact for any of that. So I was the damage control assistant. I was in charge of all the damage control for the ship, which in some ways was almost like a step down, because I was again in charge of a division. But now it's such a big ship that my division was the same size as the engineering department on the cruiser or on the frigate. And it's just such a much larger ship, scope of responsibility. There's still plenty of work to be done. So I did that. Then I went back to shore duty again after that. Screened for command special mission, really command shore is what that is. And so I went up to the float training group up in Everett, Washington, and I was in charge of the shore group that trains all the ships that are up there.
Okay.
Training up there.
You said special mission. Does that mean a specific type of class of ship? Or
it really just means not a ship.
Not a ship.
So,
okay.
You can have command or command of a ship or command special mission, which really is mostly command ashore, although trying to think if there are any ship options. I don't think there are. But that's like the Navy talent acquisition groups that do all the recruiting. Each group has a commander. That's command special mission. The float training group that I was part of, that's command special mission. And there's just different units around the assault craft units. So on the amphib, we put the little, the LCACs or the LCUs that are then the ones that go out to the beach. Well, somebody has to be in charge of those. So each of those fall under an assault craft unit. And so that CO is a CO special mission. It's not special mission like special forces, totally different.
It's just a specialized, it's not like an actual ship, it's a different type of.
Yes, anything that's not a ship that still needs somebody to command it.
And then how was your experience with that, as far as it seems like a different type of a mission than the traditional maybe ship missions?
Yes. In some ways, it felt a little weird because I felt like I had spent my whole career planning and preparing and learning and building myself towards one thing, and then shifted off and did something different. At the same time it was still something that I felt like, as I stepped back and looked at it, I'd definitely been well trained for, because we were in charge of training the ships. And so, as a junior officer, I had been a training officer where I was working on putting together the ship schedule for training and bringing everybody on board. And I was the one on the ship bringing ATG in to do all of the training. Now I was in charge of the trainers that were going to do the training. Also, in general, it was a much more senior command, because if you're going to be a trainer, you have to have done it already. So it was a very senior command, really just a lot of very knowledgeable, really solid enlisted to work with. So it was a great group of people to work with. And looking back on it, even though I had been planning on, to go on the ship side, now I'm just supporting the ships, making sure that we're giving them the training that they need to go deploy and be trained up to fight whatever they need to.
Did you see anything? And what time period was that?
That was just before this, so that was 2020 through 2024.
Okay, and during that time, I mean, what did you see evolve as far as from your? Did you take, I mean, the experiences of evolving warfare, such as drones and hypersonic, like, is that the sort of things that you're helping train the ships for that?
Wait, I mean, without getting into too many details.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, I would say that was one of the most challenging, but then also most rewarding parts of the job was trying to figure out, okay, well, this is what we've been training to. Is that still the right training? Is that meeting all the different threats? Because when you send a ship out on deployment, it has to be prepared to do everything from a small boat coming alongside like the Cole all the way up to, God forbid a country declares war on us and all of a sudden we're launching missiles over the horizon in support of, as somebody's shooting at us in support of whatever national objectives they are. That's a huge range to cover. And so each one of those warfare areas that feeds into that has its own training and then trying to figure out how all that training comes together. But short answer, yes. One of the things we were really interested in was, okay, well, especially because Ukraine had already Russia had already attacked Ukraine at that point. And so what are we seeing over there? What are we just learning through our own research and development? Are we training to the correct threats, into the correct multi-warfare threats? How do we improve training based on what, not just what we are seeing as we send our ships out, but let's look worldwide. What all is going on that we can learn from and make ourselves better?
Awesome. And was that more short time before you came here, or was that?
No, I went from that job to this job, so
Okay.
It was just before I came here. I knew at some point I wanted to do something like this, give back. I really enjoyed my time as a midshipman and getting to learn, looked up to the officers that were there while I was learning and wanted to try and give back at some point to the larger, I didn't go back to the academy, but the larger, how are we training the future officers of the Navy, which brought me here. So my wife's family's here, so I was excited to be able to come to Albuquerque, and then it ended up working out perfectly. Coming to the place that I wanted to do a job I really wanted to do. I again just got really lucky on the orders of working out the way that they did.
That's awesome. One thing you did bring up, so at what time did you meet your wife and get married?
I met her while we were in Italy.
Okay.
So she was also in the Navy.
Okay.
We were two lieutenants that were over there in totally separate jobs and branches, so not fraternization.
Right,
I think probably more common than not I ended up meeting her through the service. We were both stationed over there. She ended up getting follow-on orders to Germany. She was up for orders first. So it ended up being long distance for a little while. We were at least still on the same continent, so that helped. And then we ended up getting married after that and then starting a family. We've got a couple kids. So I will say easier for me because she ended up getting out. I went and had my department head tours next, and we were able to start a family kind of towards the end of my department head tours. If it had been flipped, it would have been a little bit harder because you can't be pregnant and be on a shift. I mean, there's just operationally, it's probably the same way.
It's the same with, no, exactly. In the Army, once you do get pregnant, you can't, like, you're put into a different, what do you call it, sort of jobs, because you can't do any of the really, really physical stuff. Exactly. And can't risk injuring yourself and things like that. That's the biggest.
So, same thing for us. If it had been reversed, it would have been fine. It just would have put some more constraints on it. She wouldn't have been getting pregnant during department tour. She would have had to wait until she was on shore duty, and then we could have started a family. Ended up working out, so we ended up starting a family there towards the end of department tours, and into shore duty, and then got lucky enough to move here near her family.
Definitely. I was wondering, does the Navy have a program, whether you're an officer or an NCO, if you have a spouse that's also in the military, to be on the same, I mean, you wouldn't be on the same ship, would you? Or
no.
How does that work?
We call it co-location, where we will make sure you're stationed together. Also, though, after I think it was the Sullivans in World War II, where we put all 5 brothers on one ship and then they all perished when the
Oh,
ship went.
okay. I didn't hear about that one,
Well,
but
no.
it's good to know.
Now we have a ship named after them called the Sullivans. So now we try not to do that and split up. So you wouldn't be on the same ship, but you'd be at least in the same geographic area. So you'll be stationed together. And we're doing as much as we can to try and figure out, okay, how do we help support the family as well? Especially if there is going to be dual military. How do you support both of those careers at the same time and get them what they need for their career and what they need for their family, and a little bit of time together to enjoy.
Definitely. Okay. You came here to Albuquerque. What's it like being, Navy ROTC? You guys are in the desert. Unfortunately, there's not a port nearby, correct?
True. Obviously, no ships. There's the submarine sail over at the Nuclear Museum.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
No ships around here. And that's really where summer training comes into play. And every summer we end up sending the midshipmen out to go experience life in the fleet. But I would say not really any different than anything else. We've got NROTC units all over the country. Most of them are not next to the water. There are a few. University of San Diego, has an ROTC. They can just walk over to the ships at 32nd Street Naval Base, but they are certainly the exception and not the rule. Even in Annapolis, we're not really at the academy. We weren't close to a naval base with surface, so it's not like I was seeing surface ships day in and day out. So I would say there's not really any loss there. Hopefully, if anything, we get a chance to help kind of spread the word and make all of Albuquerque and the greater area aware of the Navy and what we do and that we exist, because we need to, if we're going to meet recruiting numbers, we're going to need people from all over the country. You can be just as good of a surface warfare officer, from New Mexico. I feel like I'm proof of that. I guess technically Indiana touches one of the Great Lakes, sort of, but I didn't have any ocean around when I grew up. It's so similar. I think we're here, and I don't think the midshipmen are losing anything from it. And if anything, hopefully Albuquerque is gaining something. We're getting a little bit of recruiting out there.
Definitely. I was wondering, where do a majority of the students who hear about UNM Navy ROTC come from?
We have a number in, as you know, if you're coming in state, New Mexico has very generous tuition payment policies.
Definitely.
So for them, we're not covering tuition because they already have tuition covered, but we will pay room and board in lieu of tuition. So then it really does become like free ride, full scholarship at that point. Also, then surrounding states, I will say we don't get a lot from farther away, but California, Texas, Colorado, even a little bit farther than that, but mostly I'd say regional, who know about the school. Growing up in Indiana, I guess if I had thought about it, I would realize there are universities in New Mexico, just like there are in every state, but I hadn't heard about University of New Mexico. And I would say that's probably, we're drawing students from probably about as far away as know kind of about University of New Mexico and are interested in coming here.
So what do you do here at the university? Are you teaching classes? So
I am teaching one class this semester. I just finished up Sea Power, which is our naval history class. I was happy to see one of your Army ROTC cadets taking the Sea Power class. That was
nice.
Fun to have him in class. In the spring, I teach Sea Power, naval history, and then in the fall, I'll teach leadership and management as well. And then on top of that, just general XO duties. So we're our own unit. Just like, we're a unit with people, so personnel, all the different programs that we have to run, just like your unit has, I'm sure, just managing all of that as well.
All right. And then I guess what can students who come here expect from Navy ROTC? Like when you do come and take your first semester here as a freshman, not really knowing anything about the Navy, are you practicing what it's like being on a ship? What is it like your first sort of year at UNM or Navy ROTC?
Well, you can come a couple of different ways. One, if you knew you wanted to be in the Navy in high school and you were super excited and you probably had a guidance counselor who could help you out and knew about it, and you put in for the NROTC scholarship, you could come to us as a freshman on a 4-year scholarship, knowing that you've got all 4 years paid for. If that's the case, if you're already on scholarship, then we'll send you to, it's about 3 weeks of training up at Great Lakes before you even show up. So summer before your freshman year. And that's really like a mini boot camp type experience. We've got the drill instructors there that are, because all of Navy enlisted go through boot camp in Great Lakes. So we do it at the exact same place. So the same drill instructors that are out there, training up the enlisted, then come across and do some training for the junior officers. And that's where they learn the basics: how to salute, how to wear a uniform, how to make a bed, how to all the things that we just take for granted now that we've been in the military for a few years. So they show up to the beginning of their freshman year having already had that experience. They have some of their uniforms issued to them already and tailored and ready to go. They have some of that military basics, jargon, everything already sort of figured out, or at least started. The other option is college programmer, which if you didn't know about it or you didn't get selected for the scholarship, but somehow you heard about us, maybe, we're down at the new student orientations that go on through the summer. And so maybe all of a sudden you just see us there in uniform and you think, maybe the Navy would be interesting. Let me see more about this. You can come in as a college programmer. There, we're not paying a scholarship, but you're still part of the program. So they don't get the new student indoctrination experience up in Great Lakes, but they show up, and then first year is really military basics, where we are teaching them and reinforcing what they learned up at Great Lakes, or teaching them for the ones that didn't go to Great Lakes. And we're not set up exactly like a ship, because we also are turning people into submarine officers. We're also turning people into, we also have the Marine Corps. So we're turning people into Marine Corps second lieutenants. So we're really, I would set up a little bit of a mishmash between the Marine Corps and the Navy, trying to make sure that they learn both sides of it, which also then just becomes useful later on. Even at the academy, we had future Marine Corps officers there at the academy. So we did something similar. So, after graduating, I still knew a little bit about the Marine Corps, just like they knew a little bit about the Navy, which just helps make us a little bit more joint further on down the line. But the first year, the very first semester in the fall, they'll take Naval Science 101. We'll teach them where the fleets are. We'll teach them all the different ships and aircraft and everything that are in the Navy, the submarines, basics of how the Navy is organized and how we operate. And then in the spring, they'll take sea power or naval history and get a little bit more understanding of, okay, well, how did we get to where we are today, and what's our traditions and what's our history. At the same time, each semester that we do physical training, PT. That's actually a PE class through the university. So they'll do that a couple times a week, 3 times for the Marines, because they love PT. We also have a laboratory, where that's also a class through the university, but it's 1 hour a week where we sit down and we can bring in speakers. This last year we had a Master Chief that came in and talked about, okay, as a senior enlisted, to you about to be second lieutenants and ensigns, here's what I need from you, and here's what you should expect from your senior enlisted when you get to the ship or the squadron or whatever it is. So we had a Marine combat engineer, a major who's a combat engineer, come and talk about how cool it was and show all of her pictures of all the stuff she got to blow up as a combat engineer. Everybody left being like, I want to go be a combat engineer. So, we can do stuff like that during the lab period. We also do drill. So even though it's the Navy, we still do teach close order drill. Have your rifles out, and how do you march in formation? How do you stand in formation? Those are just basic discipline skills that are, we prize in the Navy just as much as I'm sure you do in the Army. So we still teach that. That feeds into the honor guards too, and the color guards that we do for some of the university activities. All of that, we have them do some volunteering. So they go out and they do some community service of some sort. They do some fundraising activities of their own as well. So if they've got a little bit of money that they can spend, we do a Navy ball in the fall. So everybody gets to get dressed up and experience, okay, well, what's a formal Navy function feel like? Just so I would say all through, and that's their first year. And then years after that, they still do PT, they still do lab. They have different naval science classes to learn different things, but still do naval science classes, still participate in the drill, still participate in the fundraising. And then as they move up, they start moving into leadership positions within the unit, within the battalion. So, we've got the active duty staff. But on the midshipman side, there's a midshipman commanding officer of the battalion. There's a midshipman executive officer, so I spend some time talking to the midshipman executive officer as well. XO to XO, okay.
Yeah.
What are you seeing
Yeah.
as the midshipman? What are and talking to the different. I would say it's a little different for me here than XO on a ship, just because we don't have quite as many people. We certainly don't have nearly the equipment to deal with that they do, or the number of programs. But yes, it sounds very similar. My basic job is making sure that the commanding officer's vision gets executed, and making sure that everybody is working together to make that happen. On the ship, a lot of it comes down to admin. So the XO is really in charge of all admin. The XO is in charge of the plan of the day, the actual schedule of what's going to happen hour to hour, minute to minute. And the big one that the XO on the ship is also in charge of is, we call it heads and beds. So the XO goes and does inspections on all the berthings as well. As you can imagine, living in really tight quarters, cleanliness and sanitation become very important. And so, all the berthings get inspected every day, and that's a major part of the XO's job, actually, is going around and making sure, the galley, the berthings, the mess decks, everything is clean and sanitary and where it needs to be, ship shape.
All right. Well, sir, awesome hearing about that. I think the last thing we would everybody would want to know is, do you have any advice for new ensigns going out to the fleet?
Well, so I'll give a couple different things. One, for ensigns or second lieutenants headed out to their first unit, just be ready to learn. There's no one is going to expect you to know any of it. Everyone's expecting you to come in not knowing it, because you don't, because you're brand new, you're just starting out. And so be humble, be willing to ask the question. Don't be afraid to ask the question, and just be ready to learn and take it all in. And then I would say, for us, if there's anybody that wants to become a midshipman, come learn more about it. We'll happily bring you in, let you shadow a midshipman, answer any questions you have. We really want to make sure this is right for you, and that you're right for the unit as well. Just like the Army, we're looking to produce leaders who are interested in serving their country. And so if that's something that excites you, then come talk to us, and we'll figure out how we can get you on the team and how we can make it happen. One of the things I didn't mention is, if you start as a college programmer, we do offer 2 or 3 year scholarships too. So you can start out as a college programmer, put yourself in for a scholarship, and if you're selected, then be on scholarship the rest of your time here at the university, or whatever university you want to go to. If somebody's out there in New Mexico that, like me, is not looking to go to, if you're living in Albuquerque, maybe not interested in going to UNM, great. We've got 78 units all over at over 100 schools throughout the country. Pick your school, get accepted, and go, whatever gets you into the Navy as an officer. Let's find a way to make it happen.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me on, and this has been fun.